Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to Curious Kingdom. Today we are recapping drama thriller movie Revolver. After serving a 7-year prison sentence, Jake Green, a gambler from London's East End, is finally released. He reunites with his brother Billy and together they head to a prominent local casino, seeking to reclaim the money owed to them by Dorothy Matcha, a notorious crime boss. Against the advice of his bodyguard, Paul, Jake decides to join Matcha's private game. Despite his claustrophobia, he reluctantly takes the elevator while battling a panic attack. As the game is on the 20th floor, Jake strategically loses his first bet against another player at the table, creating a false sense of security for Matcha. However, when Jake places the same bet with Matcha, he wins, outsmarting the crime boss, leaving the casino with their bags full of cash. Billy and Jake are intercepted by Zach, who warns them of imminent danger and offers his assistance. Jake opts to take the stairs this time but faints before descending even a single step, coinciding with a card that reads "Take the elevator." Meanwhile, at the casino, Matcha expresses his concern to Paul about Jake seeking revenge after his lengthy prison sentence, especially following an incident involving his sister-in-law. Matcha instructs Paul to hire the most skilled hitman to eliminate Jake. At the hospital, Jake is informed that no immediate cause for his blackout can be determined, so he is advised to go home and await the results of his blood test. Billy returns to his own house, while Jake is accompanied by his bodyguards for protection. Unfortunately, they are all shot as soon as they arrive at their destination. Jake narrowly escapes harm when he spots a card on the floor instructing him to pick it up, causing him to stoop down at the right moment. He attempts to flee in his car, but the driver is also shot. Fortunately, Zach arrives in the nick of time, rescuing Jake and whisking him away. The perplexed hitman, Sorter, questions how he missed his target, as he never fails. He speculates that someone must have tipped off Jake. When Matcha reprimands him, Sorter admits he missed due to a foreboding feeling. Meanwhile, Zach brings Jake to meet his partner Avi, who somehow obtained Jake's medical records. The test results reveal that Jake has a rare blood disease, guaranteeing his demise within 3 days. Avi and Zach offer Jake their protection, but with non-negotiable conditions. Jake must surrender all his money and comply with their every request, including answering any questions. They give him 3 hours to make his decision. Silently convinced that they are attempting to deceive him, Jake leaves without uttering a word. However, the results he receives from the hospital confirm the same prognosis. He suspects Zach and Avi might have bribed the lab, prompting him to seek a second opinion from his personal doctor. Holding him at gunpoint to ensure the doctor isn't also compromised, Jake reluctantly acknowledges that he has no choice. He withdraws money from the bank and returns to accept the deal offered by Avi and Zach. During a car ride, Javi enlightens Jake about their association with loan sharks, clarifying that Jake's money will be used for lending purposes. After delivering the money to their first client, Avi demands that Jake divulge his history with Matcha. Jake recounts how Matcha once employed 3 dim-witted individuals known as the Three Eddas. When they lost their cardman before a crucial game, they coerced Jake, using threats against Billy's family, to replace him. During the game, Jake became incensed when another player insulted him and his mother, leading to a gunfight. Amidst a power outage, the money vanished, and suddenly Jake found himself implicated and questioned by the police. To protect his niece, he refrained from revealing Matcha's involvement in the illicit gambling operation, resulting in a 7-year prison sentence. During that period, the Eddas managed to provoke Matcha in some manner, leading him to utilize them as pawns. After visiting multiple clients, Zach sends Jake to stay at a motel. Meanwhile, Matcha and Paul pay a visit to Sam Gold, a renowned crime kingpin admired by other crime bosses. However, Gold never receives visitors, so they meet with his advisor, Lily Walker, instead. Lily agrees to arrange a drug deal with Matcha but emphasizes Gold's aversion to publicity and second chances. Later on, Jake gives Zach and Avi more money and engages in a conversation about his time in jail while playing chess with Avi. Jake had 2 options, either serve 14 years in normal prison or 7 years in solitary confinement, so he chose the latter. His cell was located between 2 individuals, a chess master and a seasoned con man. Despite never speaking to each other, they shared everything about themselves through messages written on library books during the initial 5 years of Jake's sentence. That's how Jake learned their strategy to win any game. The 2 men planned a prison escape and promised to include Jake, but when they eventually departed, they vanished without a word, leaving Jake behind. 2 years later, upon his release, Jake discovered that the men had taken all his money and left behind a note stating, "You can only get smarter by playing a smarter opponent." Jake then employed the strategy to accumulate wealth at various casinos. As time passed, Jake continued his work by visiting different clients and giving away his own money. Although he was expected to intimidate them for payment, he couldn't bring himself to harm innocent, desperate individuals. Meanwhile, Avi and Zach are attaching one side of a wall to a truck to pull and break it, enabling them to steal a safe located on the other side. This safe contains the promised powder from Matcha to Lily. Upon discovering the theft, Matcha sends Paul to resolve the situation, regardless of the means. Paul seeks out their rival, Lord John, a prominent figure in the triad, who agrees to provide the powder on short notice but demands an inflated price. Jake, Zach, Abby, and their team go to the hotel for the exchange. They secretly enter a room adjacent to the thugs, create a hole in the wall, and inject sleeping gas, causing both Matcha's and John's men to fall asleep. They then steal the money in the powder, framing Matcha as the one who robbed John and vice versa. Later on, Jake receives a call from Billy, who informs him that Zach and Abby are so dangerous that even gold would avoid them. Billy advises Jake to leave. However, Jake disregards the warning and continues his work. He is then expected to shoot a frightened client, but he refuses and attempts to shoot at Abby instead. He realizes the gun is empty just before Abby knocks him unconscious. Hours later, Jake wakes up in the motel and receives a call from Abby, who tells him he survived his third day and should get a checkup. After being visited by his niece and Billy, who leaves him the gun as a precaution, Jake visits his doctor, who confirms that the previous diagnosis was incorrect and that Jake is fine. Jake tries to call Abby for answers, but Abby tells him to wait. Meanwhile, Paul gathers information and finds out that Jake's name is associated with all the troubles his men have faced. As a result, Paul is ordered to kill Jake. When Jake returns to the motel, he finds Abby and Zach waiting for him, warning him that Matcha's thugs are inside the room. Jake flees, and the men chase after him, but he manages to escape, especially when one of the thugs accidentally shoots himself. The other criminals discover the body and mistakenly believe it is Jake. Jake goes to see Abby and Zach at their office, where they confess that they knew Jake had concealed the entire truth about his previous dealings with the Eddas. Those three individuals had been waiting for Jake's release from prison to kill him because his actions led to their dismissal by Matcha. To save his life, Jake made a deal with the Eddas. Each month, he would give them 3% of any money they lent him. Initially, only one Eddie accepted the offer, but when the others saw that he honored the deal, they all wanted in. In reality, Jake was paying each Eddie with another Eddie's money, so he wasn't losing anything. Eventually, they ran out of money to lend and resorted to borrowing from Matcha, who became intrigued by the mysterious money-making individual associated with the Eddas. When Jake used the formula to win and amass wealth, he chose that moment to go on vacation with his brother and niece, which is when Matcha killed the Eddas for failing to repay him. Speaking of Matcha, he is having dinner at an upscale restaurant when his henchman pays him a visit. However, Jake realizes that John's lover is posing as a waitress and shoots her before leaving to pursue her driver. Unfortunately, his aim is off, and he only manages to injure her instead of killing her. In the midst of the chaos, the woman retaliates by shooting off one of Jake's fingers before succumbing to her injuries. Later, Sorter is dispatched to Lord John's hideout to eliminate him and his men on Matcha's orders. Meanwhile, Jake engages in conversation with Zach and Abby as they play golf on a rooftop. They explain to him that gold is merely an illusion and a symbol of greed, with no tangible existence. Its power only extends to those who invest in it. They advise Jake to redefine what he allows to control him. Subsequently, Jake withdraws his remaining money from the bank and donates it all before sneaking into Macho's bedroom. In a battle against his own ego, represented by the voices in his head, Jake apologizes to Matcha for deceiving him, acknowledges him as the superior crime lord, and reveals his donation made in Matcha's name. He then departs to confront his fears, taking an elevator that becomes stuck on the 13th floor. Wrestling with a panic attack, Jake engages in a mental dialogue where he rejects his ego, ultimately freeing himself from the game. Once the elevator resumes operation, Jake reaches the ground floor and encounters Matcha waiting with a gun, driven to madness by his own ego. Unperturbed, Jake calmly walks past him, which infuriates Matcha as he cannot comprehend why someone would not fear him. Overwhelmed by humiliation, Matcha breaks down in tears. The next morning, Paul presents Matcha with multiple local newspapers showcasing Jake's name plastered all over them. Jake had indeed made a donation in Macy's name, leading everyone to believe that the casino owner cares about the community. Although Matcha takes credit for it initially, his happiness is short-lived. Paul also reveals to him that Jake possesses the powder and has been deceiving them all along. Paul Sorter and the other henchmen visit Billy, who manages to conceal his daughter in a cupboard upon realizing that one of his bodyguards has betrayed him. When they discover her presence, the men begin to harm Billy's daughter while interrogating him, disbelieving his claims of ignorance about Jake and the powder's whereabouts. Sorta, feeling uncomfortable with Paul's increasingly brutal methods, decides enough is enough and systematically eliminates his Billy and his fellow henchmen. However, he makes a fatal mistake and gets killed as well. Meanwhile, Lily pays Matcha a visit, delivering a funeral garland sent by Gold as a threat, who is displeased with Matcha's prominence in the newspapers since he shuns publicity. Lily also informs Matcha that his time is up and he won't get a second chance, sending him into a panic. Avi and Zach accompany Jake and the Powder to Matcha's casino. At the casino, Avi finally defeats Jake in a game of chess and confesses the final details of their story. They had been inmates in the adjacent cells to Jake and always wanted to escape with him, but he wasn't ready to accept the truth. All this implied that they were nothing more than figments of Jake's imagination. Unfortunately, Jake has no time to process this revelation as the casino's bodyguards arrive to escort him to Matcha, who has the girl with him. After dropping the bags of powder on the floor, Jake reassures his niece that everything will be fine, which further angers Matcha, who is astonished by Jake's lack of fear even when facing a gun. The humiliation prompts the ego voices in Matcha's mind to conclude that Mr. Gold cannot harm a dead man, leading Matcha to place the gun against his own head and pull the trigger. The movie's conclusion emphasizes the theme of ego and the power it holds over individuals. By rejecting his own ego and rising above it, Jake demonstrates his liberation from the game of power and manipulation. The ending leaves the audience with a sense of triumph as Jake emerges as a free man, no longer controlled by external forces. That's all for today, folks. Like, share, and subscribe for more such content. Curious Knight signing off. Stay safe, stay curious.